One of my closest friends and I took a 9,000 mile road trip around the USA and into Mexico and Canada. This is the first episode in that story, so stick around. Let's get into it. Roll that intro. Hi all, Keith here. Welcome to the video. Before we go much further, make sure you pause that video, click the subscribe button, and ring that notification bell so you don't miss any of these upcoming videos. Back in 2003, one of my longtime friends, Phil, and I decided to take one of the most epic road trips ever to see as many national parks as we could. The whole trip took 15 days and we covered over 9,000 miles by the end of the trip. We slept in the car in the middle of a forest fire in some of the shadiest hotels you can imagine. We looked for aliens in Roswell and tried the beignets at Cafe du Monde in New Orleans. It's one trip I'll never forget. In this first episode, we're going to cover our trip from Indiana to Glacier National Park, and boy did some crazy things happen. We started out in Connersville, Indiana, which just happens to be the town that I grew up in. Our first destination we were going to was the Badlands out in South Dakota, and I'll never forget we made all the way to I-90, like heading out towards the Badlands and stuff like that, and this is like day one of the trip or something like that, maybe day two. A rock flew up and cracked my windshield, which was the first of many things that happened to my car in this entire trip. Also on I-90, if you've ever been out that way, you'll know that there's a ton of signs for two places, Wall Drugs and the Corn Palace. So after seeing all those signs, we thought, hey, why not stop and see some roadside attractions? There wasn't a lot of pre-planning that went into this trip. But anyway, here's a picture of the Corn Palace. I do remember being in awe of all these corn cobs attached to the side of this building. But when we went inside, it was like basically a giant gift shop, and there was like a little section of information about the Corn Palace. It was cool, but maybe not that exciting for two guys in their mid-20s. So we didn't really stay too long at the Corn Palace. And after our experience with the Corn Palace, we were like, do we really want to stop at Wall Drug? So anyway, we decided to skip Wall Drug, and we went on to the most alien landscape I'd ever seen in the Badlands National Park. I'll go ahead and pop a few pictures up from the park. These aren't mine, but these are what you see if you go to the park. Movies like Dances with Wolves, How the West Was Won, and Starship Troopers were filmed at this location, and it's easy to see why. It's alien and beautiful. It was amazing. From there, we drove to Wind Cave National Park. Wind Cave was actually the first national park to protect a cave system in the United States. It was also the first time I saw these cute prairie dogs out in the wild. It was cool watching them pop in and out of the holes that they made in the landscape. We even saw some buffalo for the first time on the trip. We had plans of camping actually at Wind Cave for a couple of nights, but what happened was we went and got the campsite, and then we're like, oh, Mount Rushmore isn't far from here. It's still daylight. Let's drive up to Mount Rushmore. So we drove up to Mount Rushmore. Mount Rushmore is, is one of those places you see pictures of, but until you experience in real life the grandeur of it all, it's hard to really explain. Just look at these pictures I took from there. I know they don't do it justice, but they're amazing. Anyway, we didn't realize it at the time, but we were about to have a real problem on our hands. It was getting dark and we hadn't set up our campsite back at Wind Cave. So picture this. We're driving around trying to find our campsite in a place we've never been in the pitch black. We find the campsite after much looking, and then we realize, oh my gosh, we have to set up this huge 3-room tent Phil and bought for this trip in the pitch black. And remember, this was 2003, so we didn't just have like lights on our cell phones. We had the light of the car shining up like towards the tent where we were setting it up, and we had one flashlight. So trying to set the tent up for the first time in the dark, oh my gosh, it took us maybe an hour or two to set the thing up. The one thing that I vividly remember, though, is when we climbed into the tent, there was so many daddy long legs that had, like, gotten into the tent as we were doing things. We had to, like, evict a whole bunch before we felt safe sleeping in there. But it was fine. It was fine. Anyway, the next day we woke up and after the night before, we just thought, there's no way we're doing this again. There's no way we're staying here again. We're just going to tear this thing down and head off because it was just too much of a hassle to deal with. So, spoiler alert, that's the last time that we actually used the tent on this entire trip. So we left the campsite and then we actually went into the Wind Cave. And it gets its name because there's like wind blowing through the cave, through the main entrance, and it really was quite windy in there. But it was a very beautiful cave. After the tour, we made like the wind and headed off through the Black Hills to Devil's Tower. Fun fact, when driving from Wind Cave past Mount Rushmore to Devil's Tower, you'll drive through a little town called Sturgis. And at the time, we had no idea what Sturgis was. Well, let me tell you, we found out because we drove into town and there was motorcycles everywhere. I don't think the rally was going on that day, but it was definitely the lead up days to the rally, and there was quite a few motorcycles in town back in August of 2003. But we did make it through town and we got to Devil's Tower, which is a scientific wonder and a climber's paradise. Here's a few pictures from there. We didn't really stay here for too long because we had a trek to get to our next destination, which was actually Glacier National Park. This was my first time ever in Montana, and I never really knew why they called it like Big Sky Country, but when you get out there, you really feel the Big Sky Country. I mean, you could see huge thunderstorms off in the distance that you were sure you were going to drive through, but they were like 20 miles away. You'd be driving up on a town and it's way down there and you're like, oh, we'll be there in a few minutes, but it was like 10 or 15 minutes and you're still driving towards this town. I mean, it was beautiful, frightening, and amazing all wrapped into one. And that actually coincidentally can describe our trip to Glacier National Park. We rolled into Glacier to some of the most amazing views we'd ever seen. Majestic mountains rising high into the sky and crystal clear, ice cold glacial lakes all around. Since we actually slept in our car the night before, Phil thought it would be a great idea to hop into one of these glacial ponds is to freshen up. I tried, but it was ice cold, so I didn't get it. One thing we didn't realize when we rolled into Glacier was there was a raging forest fire going on at the time in the national park. So when we were driving up the Going to the Sun road, which was amazing by the way, beautiful vistas everywhere, we also saw huge flames and forest fire for the first time. And seeing it in real life with massive plumes of smoke and fire is something to behold. This was actually the first time I'd also ever seen like a glacier in real life, and probably the most rugged terrain I had ever seen. It was definitely beautiful out there, and this park was actually my favorite that we visited on this entire trip. But anyway, it was getting late because we were exploring the park all day, so we thought, there's a lodge here, we'll just go get a room for the night. The lodge rooms were like a little bit out of our price range at the time, but they had these like wilderness cabins that were reasonably priced. So that's what we did. It was like just a basic cabin with 2 rooms and some beds and furniture, no bathroom. But it was fine. We were concerned about the raging forest fire outside though, because you could see it from the lodge. And we asked at the front desk, we're like, is it safe to be here right now? And they said yes. So we were like, okay, we'll go on in. I was pretty tired, so I just went to the cabin, laid in the bed, and was relaxing. But Phil, on the other hand, decided he wanted to go on to nature adventure in the middle. It was dark out by now. So he took his camera and he went off to nature. And I didn't really know what he did until I asked him the other day. I was like, what did you do in the wilderness? And he said he just went out looking, at nature and things like that. But he got scared that he was going to like fall off a cliff or be attacked by a grizzly bear in the middle of nature. So he ended up running back to the cabin. Anyway, in the morning, we were going to take a shower because they had like a community shower house or whatever. So we had these tokens they gave you, and the tokens were supposed to give you 8 minutes in the shower, but I don't think they gave you 8 minutes. I mean, I think it was more like 4. The showers were nice, by the way. There were like individual stalls and things like that, and it was pretty private. Back then, I used to wash my body first and then my hair. Well, that was a problem because I got my body washed and I got halfway through washing my hair and the water just stops. I'm staying there with soap in my hair and no token to get the rest of the soap out of my hair. So actually, I had to go dry myself off, get out of the shower, go to the sink and rinse my hair in the sink. to get all the shampoo out. That was a fun story, but luckily no one walked in on me while I was like rinsing my hair out in the sink. So after our showers, we went back and packed up the cabin and went out to the car. Well, remember the raging forest fire that was going on? I just remember an entire layer of ash all the way from the front to the back of my car. Luckily it didn't do any damage, and you could just sort of wipe it off, so that was good, but it was one of those shocking things I didn't really expect. I guess I should have with the raging forest fire right next door, but while we were in Glacier though, we discovered that the park actually went up into Canada. It was called Waterton Glacier International Peace Park. I know nowadays you couldn't get to Canada with just your driver's license, but back in 2003 you could, so we just hopped in the car and drove on up to Canada. We hiked around the majestic Red Rock Canyon up there, which was beautiful, and we stopped at this amazing hotel right here called the Prince of Wales Hotel. It was built for the Great Northern Railway Company, and is the only one of Canada's grand railroad hotels built by a company in the United States. We went to the hotel because Phil ended up getting his dad an eagle that was carved out of an antler. It was pretty cool. After a fun day up there in Waterton, we headed back to the border. Now getting into Canada was super easy. We had no problems at all. But getting out of Canada, we ran into some issues. We'll get into that juicy story in episode 2 next Wednesday. Make sure you hang out just a little bit longer because we'll have some end cards with some video suggestions, and we'd love it if you'd watch another video. Make sure you like, share, and subscribe so you don't miss any upcoming videos of this series. Click the join button down there below to find out the benefits of becoming a member of our YouTube family here. If you want a little less commitment but still want to support the channel, you can head over to our coffee page. It's just a way for you to drop us a virtual tip. Any way you choose to support the channel, we really appreciate it. Alright everyone, we'll catch you in the next video. Thanks a lot for watching. Peace and love.